The courtroom holds its breath. The judge lowers his eyes to the sentencing documents, the heavy silence broken only by the faint hum of the overhead lights. The defendant, a man whose actions destroyed families and shocked an entire community, stands motionless. His wrists are chained, but his posture remains upright, almost relaxed. The judge speaks, his voice steady and deliberate, declaring the most severe punishment the law allows. As the final phrase, "sentence to death," hangs in the air, something strange happens. The defendant's expression tightens, not with sorrow or panic, but with something closer to defiance. The corner of his mouth lifts into a faint smirk. That single reaction, small yet powerful, ripples through the courtroom, leaving spectators unsettled. It is a moment that reveals how unpredictable human behavior becomes when a person confronts the end of their life. Today we explore 5 of the most startling reactions ever recorded when convicted killers met their death sentences. This is an uninterrupted examination of final moments that courts, reporters, psychologists, and historians have documented in detail. Before we go deeper, take a moment to subscribe so you never miss our weekly true crime deep dives. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from today? Reactions to death sentences across American history vary in ways most people never expect. Some individuals react with explosive anger, lashing out at the very system holding them accountable. Others maintain a calm, almost emotionless exterior, as though they are merely observing their own fate rather than experiencing it. A few choose defiant humor. Some express regret, and some deliver cryptic final statements that leave everyone questioning their meaning long after the execution has been carried out. These moments, preserved in transcripts, news reports, interviews, and eyewitness accounts, give us rare insight into the psychological landscapes of individuals who committed acts that changed countless lives. Today we move chronologically through 5 cases: John Wayne Gacy, Aileen Wuornos, Panzram, Ted Bundy, and Humberto Leal Garcia. Each case contains layers of history, courtroom drama, psychological complexity, and final statements that continue to fascinate criminologists and the general public alike. Case 1. John Wayne Gacy. His crimes emerged in the late 1970s, during a period when Illinois authorities were grappling with a series of disappearances involving teenage boys and young men. Initially, these disappearances appeared unconnected. Families filed missing person reports, but there was little to suggest a common pattern. It was only when one young man, who worked for Gacy part-time, vanished without a trace in 1978 that investigators began to focus on Gacy's suburban home. Gacy was well known in his community. He seemed like a man deeply embedded in local life, a contractor, a neighbor, a volunteer who entertained children at charitable events in costume and makeup. To those who knew him casually, he appeared cheerful, hardworking, and helpful. But beneath that facade, investigators soon discovered a hidden world, a crawl space beneath his house containing remains, items belonging to victims, and evidence that tied Gacy to a shocking number of crimes. As the evidence mounted, Gacy's demeanor during interrogations and court appearances puzzled many. He rarely displayed fear or remorse. He insisted on explanations that contradicted physical evidence. During his trial in 1980, Gacy acted as though he were fighting a business dispute rather than defending himself against multiple charges involving the deaths of young men. Those who observed him commented that he maintained an almost serene composure, occasionally smiling or speaking with confidence, as if he believed he could still outmaneuver the truth. When Gacy received his death sentence in 1980, he showed little emotional reaction. Years passed as he remained on death row, and during that time he gave interviews, worked on paintings, and answered letters from curious correspondents. Even when confronted with overwhelming evidence, he continued to insist he was not responsible for the deaths discovered beneath his home. Then, on the day of his execution in the mid-90s, witnesses gathered behind the glass window of the execution chamber to observe his final moments. Instead of expressing sorrow or acknowledging guilt, Gacy delivered a short, hostile statement aimed directly at the system that prosecuted him. His words,
"Hey, I got news for you. I killed 33 times. You're only gonna kill me once." Gacy outsmarted him again.
were meant to show rebellion, a refusal to acknowledge responsibility even at the brink of death. It was a final attempt to maintain control, to project confidence, and to leave behind an image of a man who would not bend to authority. Many psychologists today interpret his reaction as a classic display of narcissistic denial, a refusal to concede anything. Even in his final breath, Gacy wanted the last moment of his life to reflect the persona he had cultivated for years, a man untouchable, unmoved, and unwilling to admit fault. What time is it where you're watching this? Drop it in the comments so I can see how far this story reaches. Case 2. Aileen Wuornos. Chaos entered the national spotlight in the early 1990s after she confessed to the deaths of several men across Florida. Unlike many serial offenders, Wuornos' life story was marked by extreme hardship from childhood onward. Born in 1956, she experienced instability from a young age, living with relatives who struggled to provide stability. She left home as a teenager, spending years on the road with no consistent support system. By adulthood, she lived a transient lifestyle, often relying on short-term work, survival instincts, and relationships that frequently ended in conflict. Wuornos' crimes occurred during a period when she was living along Florida highways, often hitchhiking or staying in motels. She claimed that each killing was an act of self-defense, describing situations where she believed the men intended to harm her. Investigators, however, found patterns suggesting she had planned at least some of the encounters. During interviews, her emotional state fluctuated dramatically. At times she appeared angry, at times drained, and sometimes deeply distrustful of nearly everyone around her. Her courtroom appearances were equally intense. There were moments where she glared at prosecutors, moments where she cried, and moments where she argued with her own defense team. As media coverage grew, Wuornos became a polarizing figure. Some people viewed her as dangerous and manipulative. Others saw her as a tragic figure shaped by years of trauma and survival-based decision-making. By 1999, Wuornos had spent years appealing her case. But as time passed, she appeared increasingly exhausted by the legal system. She began expressing a desire to end the appeals process entirely, claiming she was ready to accept the consequences. When her execution date was set in 2002, her emotional state appeared fragile, marked by frustration, anger, and what some described as psychological burnout. On the morning of her execution, Wuornos delivered a final statement that was passionate, intense, and filled with imagery. Her tone was sharp, forceful, and heavy with a sense of finality.
I made peace with my Lord, and I have asked forgiveness. I am sorry that my acts of self-defense ended up in court like this, but I take full responsibility for my actions. It was them or me. I am sorry for all the pain that my actions have caused. I am prepared to die if you say it is necessary. But I am not
of David Spears.
Thank you. And probably see, I'll be up in heaven while y'all rotting in hell.
We will handle that. If not,
Raped in the
we'll
ass
form
one of these
the Fifth
days.
Circuit to handle that.
Okay, there will be an automatic appeal. You have the right to an appeal. Mr. Glazer, is that going to be handled by you
May
or the
your
public
wife and
defender?
kids
John,
get raped.
I would ask that you would
Right
appoint the
in the
public defender's
ass.
office.
Okay,
to handle the appeal.
I'll appoint the public defender's office to handle the appeal. There's one other thing that I want to say that I think needs to be said.
I know I was raped, and you aren't nothing but a bunch of scum.
Therefore, these proceedings are now
Putting
concluded.
somebody who was raped to death, you fucking motherfucker!
Viewed her statement, interpret it as the culmination of years of emotional strain, spiritual searching, and disillusionment with the world around her. Some believe she saw her execution as an escape from the pressure she had lived under for years. Others view her final words as symbolic, reflecting her belief that something greater awaited her beyond death. Whatever the interpretation, her execution remains one of the most emotionally charged moments in Florida's criminal history. Case 3. Carl Panzram. Carl Panzram's life story reads like a chronicle of rage, stretching from childhood into adulthood. Born in the late 1880s, Panzram was sent to reform institutions at a young age, where records indicate he endured severe physical punishment. These early experiences shaped his worldview, convincing him that the world was a place where strength and cruelty were necessary for survival. By his teens, he was already involved in theft, vandalism, and violent behavior. His adult years were marked by constant travel, criminal activity, and acts of aggression across several states. Panzram spoke openly about his life in interviews and letters. He described humanity as something he deeply despised. He claimed he felt no remorse for the harm he inflicted, often expressing satisfaction in describing his crimes. His writings portrayed a man who believed he had been shaped by the cruelty of others and saw no reason to act differently. When Panzram was finally apprehended in the late 1920s, he confessed to acts committed over decades. He was sentenced to death in 1930. Unlike many individuals facing execution, Panzram did not appeal his sentence. In fact, he insisted that it be carried out as quickly as possible, expressing open hatred toward the legal system and the people responsible for guarding him. Witnesses noted that he remained hostile in the days leading up to his execution, expressing impatience and frustration with what he saw as unnecessary delays. On the day of his execution in 1930, Panzram remained consistent with his lifelong persona. He directed his final statement toward the officials present, delivering words that were aggressive, confrontational, and filled with contempt. There was no fear in his voice, no hesitation. For Panzram, the execution was not a moment of reckoning. It was, in his eyes, a final opportunity to express his lifelong fury at a world he believed had wronged him from the start. Psychologists examining his case often describe him as a man shaped by cycles of violence so profound that remorse may have been psychologically impossible for him. His reaction remains one of the most extreme displays of anger ever recorded in an execution chamber. If you're finding this breakdown informative, tap the like button so more viewers can discover it. Case 4. Ted Bundy. By the late 1980s, Ted Bundy had become one of the most widely studied, discussed, and analyzed criminal offenders in American history. His crimes, spanning Washington, Oregon, Utah, Colorado, and eventually Florida, created a trail of devastation across the western United States. Bundy's ability to present himself as charming, articulate, and even helpful allowed him to blend into communities, approach victims without alarming them, and deceive friends, partners, and even law enforcement officers. Bundy's trials were broadcast nationally, attracting massive attention. His unusual decision to represent himself during parts of his Florida trial added an additional layer of spectacle, with Bundy cross-examining witnesses and delivering arguments as though he were a seasoned attorney. Prosecutors described him as intelligent, manipulative, and calculating. Psychologists studying him suggested he had the ability to compartmentalize his life so completely that he could detach from the reality of his crimes even while sitting in a courtroom filled with evidence. After years of denying responsibility and attempting to avoid execution through appeals, Bundy's final days approached in 1989. During interviews with investigators and journalists, Bundy attempted to shape the narrative surrounding his life, suggesting that various societal forces contributed to his behavior. These discussions struck many as deflective, lacking genuine remorse. When Bundy entered the execution chamber, he remained composed. He conveyed a calmness that startled some witnesses who expected a dramatic reaction. Instead of addressing the families of his victims or acknowledging his crimes, Bundy directed his final words toward his own loved ones, expressing affection and nothing more. This lack of acknowledgement.
Robert Bundy, you are charged, indictment, 2 counts burglary, 2 counts murder in the first degree, 3 counts attempted murder in the first degree. Design or intent to effect the death of said Lisa Levy.
My chance to talk to the press.
Contrary to section 78204 Florida statute.
I'll plead not guilty right now.
And your grand jury is being...
For I find it somewhat absurd to ask for mercy for something I did not do. So I will be tortured for and will suffer for and receive the pain for that act. But I will not share the burden for the guilt.
It reinforced what many psychologists had long suspected. Bundy was a master of presenting a polished, controlled exterior, even when the truth about his actions was undeniable. His final moment displayed the same emotional detachment that characterized much of his life, leaving behind a legacy of manipulation and unpredictability. If you enjoy deep dives into cases like these, share this video with someone who also follows true crime stories. It really helps support the channel. Case 5. Humberto Leal Garcia. Our final case unfolds in the early 1990s, when Humberto Leal Garcia was convicted in Texas. Unlike the previous cases, Leal's legal journey drew international attention because of concerns surrounding foreign national rights outlined in international treaties. According to claims made by various legal organizations and by Mexican officials, Leal had not been informed of his right to contact his country's consulate upon arrest. This issue led to extensive appeals and political debate that reached as far as the United States Supreme Court and even involved diplomatic conversations between the United States and Mexico. Despite these international debates, the core facts of Leal's case remained central to the proceedings. As years passed, human rights groups, foreign officials, and legal scholars weighed in, arguing that ignoring treaty-based protections undermined the fairness of the process. Meanwhile, the family of the victim continued to seek closure, emphasizing the emotional impact of the case. When Leal's execution date finally arrived in the early 2010s, witnesses described a reaction markedly different from the other cases we have discussed. Leal did not express anger or deny responsibility. Instead, he spoke with sorrow. He apologized directly to the victim's family, acknowledging the pain he caused. His final words included a phrase expressing cultural connection and identity, offering a final acknowledgement of where he came from and who he believed himself to be in his final moments. Experts who reviewed the case often describe his final reaction as reflective and emotionally grounded. Some believe that the years of public debate, legal appeals, and international involvement may have contributed to his introspective tone. Others argue that his final statement showed a level of accountability rarely seen in death penalty cases. Whatever the interpretation, Leal's last words remain memorable for their emotional weight and contrast sharply with the defiance displayed in earlier cases. These 5 cases reveal a spectrum of human reactions to the ultimate form of accountability. Some individuals respond with denial, unable to accept the reality of what they have done. Others express fury, lashing out at the system that has taken control of their lives. Some, like John Wayne Gacy and Panzram, use their final breaths to reinforce the personas they maintained throughout their lives. Personas built on arrogance, anger, or antagonism. Others, like Aileen Wuornos, express a mixture of exhaustion and emotional intensity shaped by years of trauma and turmoil. And a few, like Humberto Leal Garcia, face their final moment with reflection, remorse, or a final connection to identity. These reactions, recorded in court transcripts, eyewitness accounts, interviews, and historical documents, offer rare insight into the psychological realities of individuals who committed acts that had lasting effects on victims, families, and entire communities. Their final statements do not undo their actions, nor do they offer closure in all cases, but they do allow us to glimpse the complexity of the human mind at a moment when no future remains only truth or denial, or whatever final message the condemned chooses to leave behind. Which reaction surprised you the most? Tell me in the comments. And before you go, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next in-depth true crime breakdown.